Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Got Harem with Ino and Temari Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. As the meeting of Sunagaku's advisory council dragged on, Baki found himself growing increasingly frustrated. This was mostly due to the complete and utter lack of progress, as no one could agree on a correct course of action. Politicians unable to compromise. Perish the thought. He mentally snarked. He was currently tuning out his fellow counselors, choosing instead to skim Temari's field report of her brother's defeat. Incredible, he thought bitterly. We have a situation that requires decisive leadership and none of these old fools can agree on anything. Fortunately, the Sand Ninja had managed to eke out a ceasefire with the Leaf, but if their scout reports were to be believed, they'd need much more than that. Convincing Konohagakure of their sincerity in drawing up a new treaty was paramount, especially considering the latest fiasco that they currently found themselves in. The reports on the table in front of him showed Baki that Sunagaku was in a desperate position. The failed invasion of Konohagakure had cost Sunagaku a significant chunk of its best Chunin and Jonin, not even taking into account the finances they practically flushed down the toilet. Already weakened by the fiscal neglect of the Wind Daimyo, Sunagaku now stood as the weakest of the big five, by an uncomfortable amount. Again referring to the reports from scout teams, Baki cringed. Iwagakure was currently probing along the Wind-Earth border. Not a promising sign, given the bloody history between the two powers. Historically, Iwagakure was the reason Sunagaku had allied with Konohagakure in the first place. A thought struck him as he glanced over the scout report once more. His eyes narrowed in thought. Perhaps Sunagaku's position wasn't as hopeless as he thought. No matter the current political relationship, Konohagakure simply could not allow Iwa to get a foothold into Suna territory, because this would eliminate Suna as a barrier to Iwa. If Iwa were to conquer Suna, then they would be practically at Konoha's doorstep, and given the history between those TWO countries, it made the Suna-Iwa relationship look like an arranged playdate between children. Still, the probing of Iwa ninja was concerning. It's a pity the Yondaime Hokage didn't survive the Kyuubi attack. If he were alive, Iwagakure would never be moving this aggressively. With this thought still in mind, he took a sip of coffee as he flipped to the last page of Temari's report, and almost spit it right back out in shock. Clipped to the page was a picture of the Konohagakure genin that managed to subdue and defeat Gaara. Baki's mind immediately ground to a halt, one word permeating throughout his shocked core. In Namikaze! Single quote. Startled by the sudden movement next to him, Yura glanced at Baki curiously. With only a year of service to the council, Yura was a young buck, but a rising star for his industriousness and loyalty. Still, given his lack of seniority, he had only made a handful of statements during the current council session. Gently nudging his neighbor, he leaned over and whispered, "Something wrong, Baki? You look like you've seen a ghost or something." Quote. Baki examined his fellow council member, and decided to share his newest insights. "You wouldn't be far off the mark, Yura. It's possible I may have come up with a way for Sunagaku to recover, but I'm unsure just how well it will play out." Quote. Yura rolled his eyes. "Come on, it can't possibly be worse than Otokaze's brilliant plan to bribe Tanagakure into betraying Konohagakure and allying with us. Something tells me that they're not interested at all in being our buffer against Konoha." Quote. Baki snorted with disgust. It had taken some effort on his part, but he'd managed to scrap that little disaster before it gained ground. "No, I plan on trying to regain our alliance with Konohagakure. We've shared with them how the Cage died, as well as Orochimaru's betrayal, and while that stayed their hand, we need a military alliance, not just a truce." "Really?" Yura whispered back confused. "Given how our last alliance ended, what could we possibly offer that they would agree to? Our track record isn't the best when it comes to holding up our end of the bargain, much as I'm loath to admit." Quote. I may as well explain my plan to the council instead of doing it piece by piece. Standing, Baki addressed his peers. Honorable members of the council, some new facts have come to my attention, and I believe I have a partial solution to our current issues. Quote, seeing as he now had the undivided attention of everyone in the room, Baki braced himself and clasped his hands behind his back. One step at a time, old man. The only realistic solution to our current trouble with Iwagakure is to somehow re-establish our alliance with Konohagakure. It is only through this that we can buy the time we desperately need to recover our resources and recoup our losses, and everyone knows this. The question facing us is simple. How do we prove that we won't betray Konohagakure again? Baki ignored the winces from several of the council members as he reminded them that Sunagakure had indeed betrayed Konohagakure, despite Orochimaru's manipulations. Ignoring the rising back chatter and retorts, Baki considered how to phrase what he needed to say. Perhaps a small Konohagakure history lesson. Raising his hands for silence, Baki waited until the room quieted once more. In the past, Konohagakure had an ally it trusted with everything. The alliance between Uzushiogakure and Konohagakure was sealed by a marriage between the Shidaime Hokage and a woman named Uzumaki Mito. That alliance lasted for decades, until Uzushiogakure was destroyed by Kumogakure and Iwagakure in the Second Great Ninja War. I believe we can use that tradition ourselves to tie Konohagakure back to our interests. Quote, Otoke's, Baki's self-proclaimed rival on the council, quite fairly exploded at this. You couldn't possibly be serious. We need every shinobi we have. Why would we offer one to Konohagakure, and why would they accept even if we did? What possible motive or incentive could we offer? Turning, Baki faced the man directly. Speaking in a calm, controlled manner, almost as if speaking to a child, Baki presented his case. Konohagakure will accept because they cannot afford the strategic threat of Iwagakure conquering us. They know that facing Iwagakure on two fronts would be a recipe for disaster, and as angry with us as they are, I believe Iwagakure is a far greater concern for Konohagakure. Satetsu, another council member, spoke up in a manner that showed his irritation. Baki, that's all well and good, but you still haven't told us the rest of it. Please stop stalling. Baki picked up his copy of Temari's report and waved it at the council. I would suggest you all fully read Temari's report on Gaara's defeat, but I will briefly summarize, since we're short on tea. She states that Gaara was defeated by a single genin, even after he'd fully manifested his Biju. Ignoring the gasps of shock this produced, he pressed on. She states that this genin, Uzumaki Naruto, and I do stress the surname, produced more Kage Bunshin than she could count. This forced Gaara to assume Shukaku's full form. Uzumaki then summoned a toad Temari describes as nearly the size of a mountain. She also reports that the toad was wearing a blue gambler's jacket, smoking a large pipe, and had a giant tanto which it used against Gaara in his full Biju form. I can only think of one toad that matches that description. Yura glanced up after going over the info in Temari's report. So, what do we actually know about this Uzumaki boy? Our pre-invasion intelligence described him as a non-entity. Quote, I firmly believe that there is more to this boy than Konohagakure is showing the world. Baki stated with certainty. The records showed he graduated last in his class, but I have personally seen the boy use a Jonin-level technique, a kinjutsu at that, with ease. Summoning toads indicates he is apprenticed to Jiraiya of the Sannin, and I believe you are all aware of that man's last apprentice. Speaking of the Yondaime Hokage, you may be interested in the photo attached to the file in question. Quote, Yura glanced at the photo, then at the rest of the council, before coming back to Baki with a questioning look. I'm afraid I'm not seeing it, Baki, and I don't think anyone else is either. Baki sighed. For the love of, all right, I want you to look at the young man in the photo and consider the following. He has spiky blonde hair and sharp blue eyes, not common in Konohagakure, save the Yamanaka clan. He is apprenticed to the legendary Sannin Jiraiya, and is apparently very powerful, given that he Defeated Gaara. He also has, judging by the scope and level of his techniques, a ridiculously high amount of chakra for one so young. Put all of those things together, and who does he remind you of? It took a moment, each member focusing intently on the picture. Then, without warning, Sweet Cammy, an elderly member blurted, "He looks just like a younger Yellow Flash." Precisely. Baki said with a smirk. Earlier, I told you that the Shadaime Hokage married a woman named Uzumaki Mito. The only Uzumaki I remember from Konohagakure was Kushina, the red-hot-blooded habanero, and she died 13 years ago during the Kyuubi attack. Now consider this. We have Uzumaki Naruto, age 13, who bears a strong resemblance to the late Namikaze Minato, also slain in the Kyuubi attack. The boy was listed as an orphan, but was enrolled in the Shinobi Academy, sponsored by the Sandaime Hokage. Furthermore, the boy is now apparently apprenticed to Jiraiya, the man who trained the Yellow Flash. Take all of this into account, and there are far too many coincidences to be ignored. There's only one logical conclusion. This boy is most certainly the son of the Yondaime Hokage and Uzumaki Kushina. Very well, I can follow your logic, Otoke said, after a full minute of mulling over Baki's latest revelation. However, I am unsure where you are going with this. What does the supposed heir of the Yondaime have to do? Baki grinned as his rival trailed off, his eyes widening as the implication hit him. It's fairly simple, really. We offer Temari in marriage to the Uzumaki boy as a gesture of good faith on our part. Quote, why Temari? She is the daughter of our late Kazekage and is quite skilled. Couldn't we offer someone who wouldn't be missed? No, we offer Temari to prove our commitment. Her skill and ancestry will make for an irresistible incentive for Konohagakure's leaders to accept our agreement. Any children from the union are likely to be very powerful, and we will insert a clause in the agreement stating that the first male child produced from their union must be married back to Sunagakure. The council members sat back and pondered the proposal. The marriage would seal the Sand Leaf Alliance and offered the chance to gain powerful shinobi for the village in the future. The potential benefits were quite large, with minimal risks to boot. All said, it was a win for all sides involved. The Leaf once more had an ally in the Sand Village, as well as having a powerful shinobi in their fold, and the exact same could be said for Suna. Seeing everyone in agreement, the decision was made official that evening and an offer was sent, proposing a marriage contract to the Konohagakure Council. Several days later, the Konohagakure Council was gathered to discuss the surprising offer received from Sunagakure. With no Hokage, the council was limited on its options. It could not implement policy or assign missions higher than B rank, but it was the de facto power in the village. The council consisted of the heads of the various shinobi clans, with the Sandaimi's old teammates, Homura and Kaharu, as honored elders. Also present was Shimura Danzo, an old rival of the late Sandaime and a skilled warrior and tactician. Currently, Kaharu was reading the scroll received from Sunagakure. This is certainly interesting, she said, quietly lowering the scroll. It seems our esteemed colleagues in Sunagakure wish to make amends for their foolishness. Quote, her former teammate, Homura, snorted in disgust. Of course they do. If they don't, Iwagakure will crush them. It would serve them right for their treachery. It's a pity that we can't afford to let Iwagakure gain a strategic advantage like that. Quote, it surprised everyone when Danzo, the old war hawk himself, spoke up. Agreed, we cannot let Iwagakure gain such an advantage. It would be in our best interests to accept. As the rest of the council turned to him in mild shock, he continued bitterly. As you are all undoubtedly aware, I would prefer to simply crush them outright for their betrayal, but circumstances argue against it. Since we cannot punish them without drawing attention from other countries, as well as removing a barrier nation between us and Iwa, I see no harm in accepting a deal that will benefit Konohagakure far more than Sunagakure. Logically, you are correct, Danzo-san, Aburame Shibi droned in the usual Aburame monotone. This offer does seem to be to our advantage, but I find your stance puzzling. You have always petitioned for Uzumaki to be trained by you as a weapon. Accepting this offer would seem to directly counter the position you've held for nearly a decade and a half. Danzo tapped his cane as he considered his response. It is true that I want him trained as a weapon. I was, however, overruled, and as such, I must consider other ways he may be of use to Konohagakure. Sunagakure is now offering the daughter of their late Kazekage, by all reports a powerful kunoichi, if she marries Uzumaki. He smiled grimly. I suspect that Sunagakure may have discovered the boy's heritage. Troublesome, muttered Nara Shikaku. If they haven't discovered Uzumaki's heritage, this deal is completely in our favor. I remember this Temari girl from the exam and she seemed quite skilled. On top of it, she's a wind user as well, very rare here in Konohagakure. Even if Sunagakure has discovered the boy's heritage, the deal, while more even, still favors us. Marrying the children of two Kage is likely to produce very powerful children in turn. I suspect that is the reason they want a male child married back to Sunagakure. A male child would be able to start a clan, another point in favor of Sunagakure having guessed who Uzumaki is. Quote, everyone sat back to consider the Nara's words and examine the offer for other hidden agendas. Having only recently taken his seat as head of Clan Sarutobi, Asuma was somewhat confused. I thought the boy was just an orphan, unfortunately chosen to have the Kyuubi sealed inside him. Everyone here seems to know something about him. Wait, he said son of a Kage. It couldn't be. Yondaime. He sealed the Kyuubi no Yoko in his own son. In his newfound confusion and anger, Asuma blurted out, are you telling me that Uzumaki is the Yondaime's son? To his shock, most of the council simply nodded in his direction, seemingly unfazed by this revelation. The Yondaime had a son. Why was this hidden? It should be obvious, Asuma. The Yondaime made many enemies during the Third Great Shinobi War, came the reply from Hyuga Hiyashi. The boy would have been in grave danger had word gotten out about who his father was. Danzo surprised the council once more by being the next to speak. It was as if the old warhawk had suddenly developed an interest in council affairs. At this point, I don't see any option but to accept this offer. It is slanted too far in our favor to decline without tipping our hand regarding the boy's heritage. If we chose to decline by announcing that heritage, I have no doubt Kumogakure, and especially Iwagakure, would react unfavorably. We also need the boy to produce more Uzumaki, as possible future containers for the Kyuubi, if not outright shinobi for our future ranks. Unless there are generous volunteers here that are willing to offer up their progeny to such a fate. Seeing the members of the council refuse to meet his lone eye, he nodded. Very well, since we are in agreement, let us send our response. What? The yell from the council chamber echoed through the building, down the street, and throughout the village. Kankuro found himself in the odd position of hiding from his sister. While this wasn't too uncommon, his choice of hiding spot, behind his brother, was a new one. Not something he would have dreamed of even a month beforehand, but Gaara had been different ever since his loss to the blonde-haired Rue. NT during the invasion. The redhead was still stoic in the face of his sister's rage. This part of Gaara hadn't changed. Kankuro was positive Gaara really didn't understand feelings, or at the very least, had a feeble grasp of their concept, but he wasn't radiating continuous bloodlust anymore, so. This was a plus in his book. As far as he knew, other than some bandits on the way back from Konohagakure, Gaara hadn't killed anyone since the invasion. Hence the reason he was hiding behind Gaara as his sister raged. It wasn't cowardice, he told himself firmly. No, of course not. It was a strategic retreat, damn it. Meanwhile, Temari, fuming in the center of the room, was not in the best of moods. Giving her sensei a look that belied the hidden rage, the unbridled fury that lay beneath, she smiled up at him, EY's closed and teeth bared. Care to repeat your last statement, Baki-sensei? Because I could have sworn I misheard you. Why, I swear you just said I was sold off as marriage material to the Leaf Village Tilda. Baki sighed, both inwardly and outwardly. Well, I shouldn't be surprised this is her reaction. In reality, I'd probably be more worried if she didn't react this way. The only good thing so far is that Gaara seems to be. Well, not Gaara. And by that, I mean not outright murdering Mai. I'm going to take that as a win even if Temari ends up doing it herself. Famous last words, Baki. Inhaling and exhaling deeply, Baki held his hands out. Temari, this is an order from the council. To cement our alliance with the Leaf, we need a strong symbol of commitment. I am truly sorry, but as the daughter of a cage, you always knew a political marriage was a potential future for you. Quote. Temari ground her teeth as she snarled back, not willing to back down just yet. Yes, I knew that I could possibly have a political marriage. However, I was under the impression that it would be here in Sunagakur. Not married out as a sacrifice to another village. To his credit, Baki did feel sorry for his soon-to-be former charge. Temari had no way of knowing that, though, even if he did continuously apologize. We need this alliance badly, Temari. If there was any other choice, but there isn't. Shaking his head sadly, he continued. We were tricked, fooled by Orochimaru into doing his bidding. However, we still attacked an ally, despite the alliance between us. If we don't regain Konohagakure as an ally, Sunagakur will face Iwagakure moving against us alone. With the losses in the invasion, we wouldn't be able to stop them. We need time, Temari. Your sacrifice will buy us that time. Quote. Temari gripped her fan hard, small grooves appearing in the metal. She clamped her jaw shut against the urge to rage against the world that seemed turned against her. Reminding herself that she was a kunoichi of Suna, she forced herself to calm down. I suppose it is a shinobi's duty to sacrifice for the village, she told herself grimly, but damn it, why me? Why not Kankuro? She glanced in his direction, and got a whimper from behind Gaara's back, while the redhead merely stared at her, almost as if he was confused. Taking a deep breath, she lifted her head to meet Baki's forlorn gaze. I understand my duty, Baki-sensei, but I still don't like this. Has my future husband been decided? Baki debated telling her, but with Gaara standing there, decided not to push his luck. He felt he'd dodged enough kunai today, and didn't want to add sand shuriken to that list. No, he calmly lied. We have yet to hear back from Konohagakure. He didn't want to be near Temari when she found out who her future husband would be, and he definitely didn't want to be anywhere near Gaara. Not that that was unusual, but with his sister's future on the line. Let's just say silence was golden in this matter. I would recommend that you study leaf customs while we wait. Once again, for what it's worth. I am sorry, Temari. Having said that, he turned and walked out the door, closing it behind him and leaving the three siblings alone. Closing her eyes to stop the tears, Temari bit her lower lip. She was startled when she felt a hand gently clasp her shoulder. Looking down, she was amazed to see it was Gaara's, and even more surprised when it seemed he was trying his best to comfort her. I don't think he really understands, she thought, seeing the confusion still prominent in her brother's eyes, but he is trying. Forcing a small smile, she covered his hand with her own. Thank you, Gaara. Gaara wasn't sure what his sister was feeling, but he recognized tears as a symbol of the same feelings he used to have as a child. Something he now knew as pain. They were feelings in need of comfort. Single quote. Perhaps this is what Uzumaki meant when he talked about protecting those precious to him. Taking his hand off her shoulder, Gaara tried to voice what he was feeling. Temari, if he hurts you, I will kill him. To her own surprise, as well as Gaara's, Temari pulled him into a hug. Gaara had threatened to kill her many times when she was younger, but he had never threatened to kill for her. Thank you, Gaara. Eyeing the towering gates in the distance, Jiraiya glanced at his traveling companions. Hot. Big busted ex-teammate. Check. Ex-teammate's hot apprentice. Check again. Calm, collected apprentice. Che. He paused, sensing something was seriously wrong. Since when was Naruto ever calm? Hey Gaki, shouldn't you be? I don't know, bouncing around or something. You're never this quiet. Crossing his arms, Naruto glared at him. Ero Sennin, I died on this trip. Literally. I'm tired of pretending I'm always happy, especially if I'm not. I'm done with it. As soon as we get back and get Ba-chan settled, I'm gonna go get rid of the jumpsuits. Quote. Shizune spoke up. But Naruto-kun, I thought you like orange. Oh, I do. Orange is completely awesome. Glancing at Jiraiya and Tsunade, he narrowed his eyes and added, it's a mix of red and yellow. How could it not be awesome? Still, I think I can find something a bit more subdued. I don't need the attention anymore. A short glance passed between the two Sannin as they picked up the deeper meaning to the words. Guess that saves me the trouble of telling him who his parents were. Jiraiya stifled a laugh as they passed through the gates. The kid might have dropped his happy-go-apeshit mask, but he was still filled with enough energy to bounce around like a pachinko ball. Watching Naruto leap up to walk on the wall next to them, Jiraiya had a thought. He may have decided not to pretend to be happy all the time, but I doubt it changed who he is inside. Alright Gaki, while I get Harem here settled at the Hokage Tower, how about you go home and do that whole jumpsuit burning thing you were talking about? Sounds like a plan, Ero Sennin. Naruto called as he bounced off. You know, Tsunade said as they walked along, watching Naruto's retreating form. He looks so much like his father, but Kami, he acts like his mother. Quote. Yes and no, Harem, Jiraiya replied seriously. He may have some of her traits, but Kushina wouldn't have mastered the Rasengan in less than a week. The kid has tons of potential, and if he gets serious with his training, his skill level is going to skyrocket. Finding himself facing the door to the Hokage's office, he gave Tsunade a small bow with a smirk. After you, Hokage-sama tilde. Resisting the urge to smash him through said door, Tsunade entered to find herself facing her old sensei's desk. It hit her then. For the first time, she really felt the grief of the old man's death. Crossing her arms, she hugged herself as a few tears escaped. Taking some deep breaths, she calmed herself, brushed them away, and turned to face her old teammate. It's hard to believe the old monkey is gone, she said softly. I could almost see him when we walked in. Sliding behind the desk, she realized that she still wanted to make the old man proud. She also realized something else. Wonder if he still had that emergency sake stashed in his desk. Opening the bottom drawer, she pulled back a secret compartment, then flashed Jiraiya a smile as she pulled out a jug. Nice, Mount Myoboku. I take it you gave this to him. Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door, followed by the door opening and Kaharu and Homura entering the office. Tsunade eyed them, remembering that they were the elder advisors on the council, as well as two of her least favorite people. She thought, putting the jug away and slamming the drawer. If I want to get anything done, I have to play nice and not just tell them off. They're not so senile that they've forgotten how to throw a wrench or two into things. Forcing a smile to the surface, she welcomed them in with a nod of her head. Jiraiya, however, had no qualms about frowning in their direction. It didn't matter, as he was ignored entirely. Welcome back, Tsunade-sama, they said in unison with short bows. Homura continued, we are pleased to see you return to take up your family's mantle, but we're a bit pressed for time. There's been a recent development that requires immediate attention on your part. Producing a scroll and handing it over, he waited for her to scan the contents. Sunagakur has made a rather interesting offer, and the council has decided to accept it. We merely need your approval, now. Tsunade finished reading the scroll after several minutes, and steepled her fingers in front of her face. The full council agreed to this. Hi, it was a unanimous decision, Hokage-sama. Quote. Then I'm to understand that the council also believes Sunagakure is aware of Naruto's heritage. Both elders nodded. Hi. Tapping her fingers together, Tsunade leaned back to consider her options. She couldn't override the council for two reasons. One, knowing the elders, they'd already sent an agreement letter to Suna. If she reneged on the offer, it would look bad on Konoha's part, and not put her tenure as Hokage off to a great start. Because the offer had already been accepted. Second, even if they hadn't, which was entirely possible, the entire council had unanimously agreed on it, and should she veto it, the council could push it through anyway, simply because the entire council backed it. Checks and balances, mind you. However, a small grin came to her face. How much did the council really know about Naruto's heritage? Based on what she'd gleaned from Jiraiya, and her own musings on the subject, she reckoned they didn't know what they were getting into entirely. Time to put that to the test. Has the council considered the consequences of Naruto's marriage domestically? She asked with a smile, one that had Jiraiya, who knew what that smile meant, look off to the side with one part glee, one part worry. Worry because he knew how Tsunade could get in these situations, and if push came to shove. He was headed for the window. A look of confusion passed between the two elders, before Kaharu spoke. I'm afraid I'm not sure what you are referring to, Tsunade-sama. Quote. With a grin a predator might have envied, Tsunade clarified. When Naruto marries, he will officially become head of both Clan Uzumaki and Clan Namikaze. As such, he will inherit everything from both of those clans, since he's the sole survivor of each. This will be including funds from both clans and the Namikaze council seat, as well as any property and land still in those clans' possession. Surely you didn't forget something like that when you approved this marriage. Quote. As Tsunade spoke, Jiraiya had been fighting the giggles the entire time. Watching the faces of the two elders fall further and further, until they outright dropped in dismay, Jiraiya roared in laughter as both elders assumed expressions of shock. It was painfully obvious that they had not considered the clan inheritance laws would apply to Naruto. Those eligible to become clan heads did so under two circumstances: when they reached Jonin rank, or when they married. Short of canceling the proposed engagement and embarrassing themselves, as well as Konoha, there was nothing they could do to stop Naruto from becoming head of Clan Namikaze and Clan Uzumaki. Jiraiya's only concern, however, was that once the cat was out of the bag, there'd be no way to keep the Mater quiet any longer. With that thought in mind, soon Minato's former enemies would have a new target in mind. If they couldn't get to the Yondaime, he reasoned, they'd go for the next best thing. After a quick stop as Ichiraku Ramen to down a few bowls of his favorite dish, Naruto headed off to Hi's apartment intent on disposing of his collection of jumpsuits. During the month leading up to the Chunin exam's third stage, he'd used his improved stealth and henge skills to quietly assemble a new outfit for himself. He was still firmly convinced orange was the best color, but he'd reluctantly decided that perhaps he shouldn't wear so much of it. He'd been delighted when he found a store selling colored animal prints, including a pair of orange and black tiger striped pants. He still got to wear orange, but the pants were much more professional. He was dismayed when he couldn't find a matching jacket, so he'd made do with a black one that had 3 narrow orange stripes running down each sleeve. He was broken out of his thoughts by the sound of someone crying nearby. Hopping up on a nearby roof, he was surprised to see Konohamaru sitting there, knees hugged to his chest as he cried. Walking over, he sat down next to him and ruffled the kid's hair gently. Hey Kono, what's wrong? Konohamaru glanced up, his eyes full of pain, and Naruto had to lean in as the boy whispered a reply. I miss Grandpa, but everyone keeps telling me I gotta move on. It's like they're forgetting him, like he was never here. It's not right. He was the Hokage. How can people just forget him? Pulling his adopted little brother into a one-armed hug, Naruto ruffled his hair again in a soothing manner. Kono, no one is going to forget about Gigi. He was Hokage for a really long time, and he did a lot for this place. I bet if you go up to just about anyone, they'll have a story or something positive to say about him. He's still here in our hearts, and what we can do is live in a way that would make the old man proud. Quote. You really think so, boss? The sniffing boy asked. Naruto flashed him a hearty smile. Yeah, believe it. Konohamaru studied his proclaimed rival. Hey Ni-chan, when did you get so? He paused to consider a word that would fit. I don't know. Smart, I guess. Naruto chuckled at the other boy's confusion. I learned when I was younger that if I acted like an idiot, people paid attention to me. It was a trade-off. You know, I wasn't happy about being called names and being insulted, but they at least knew I existed. Quote. Konohamaru's eyes were wide as he stared at Naruto. This wasn't a side of his friend he'd ever seen before. Naruto was supposed to be all smiles and laughs. For a moment, he felt like he was talking to his grandfather, listening to one of the stories of the old man's youth. A strange combination of sadness and joy welled up within him, and he wasn't sure how to respond. Still, appearances had to be maintained, so he rolled his eyes. That seems kinda stupid, boss. Cuffing the back of Konohamaru's head, Naruto stood up. Hey, you gonna try and tell me your old attacks on Gigi were any different? I gotta get moving, but I'm glad you're feeling better. Catch ya around. Flashing a foxy grin, he formed a ram seal and vanished in a swirl of leaves. When did boss learn the Shunshin? Popping up in front of his apartment, Naruto was surprised to see Jiraiya waiting for him with a serious expression. Ero Sennin, I thought you were with Ba-chan. Shouldn't you be off doing some research, or something? Damn it Gaki, stop calling me that. Anyway, we don't have time for this right now. Harem wanted us over at the hospital half an hour ago. Where the hell have you been? After listening to Naruto's quick explanation regarding Konohamaru, he nodded his head. You did a good thing Gaki, and it's a good excuse, for anyone but Tsunade. We gotta go now, or she is gonna turn us to paste. And by us, I mean you, because you're my meat shield in all this. Got it. After a quick, fear-filled nod from the blonde, they both vanished in swirls of leaves. Sakura and Ino were happily chatting as they walked into Sasuke's hospital room. They had been checking up on Kakashi and Sasuke daily, hoping that they would wake up. Most days, Ino would accompany Sakura as the girls worked on repairing the friendship their rivalry over a boy had almost ruined. Sakura still pined after Sasuke, but she winced as she thought back over the things she had thrown away in pursuit of the boy. With her sensei and teammate in the hospital, and the other teammate out doing Kami knows what, Sakura had remembered how much she hated being alone. I'm not going to give up on Sasuke-kun, though, she thought to herself. I'm just going to have to find some sort of balance between him and everything else. She was broken out of her thoughts when she heard voices coming from Sasuke's room. Recognizing one of the voices as Naruto's, she surprised herself by smiling. She found that she had actually missed the boy while he was gone. It seemed her hyper teammate was finally back, but she was curious as to why he was in Sasuke's room. Probably being his normally boisterous self, though, she shook it off as a practical certainty, and reached the door. Opening said door, she saw Naruto, but didn't recognize either of the other two in the room. One was a white-haired man, rather tall and pushing 50, leaning against the far wall with his arms crossed as he observed the room's other occupant. The occupant in question was a woman who looked to be in her late 20s, with her blonde hair in twin pigtails over a green gambler's jacket with the Con. G for Gamble emblazoned on the back. Shocker. The woman was holding her hands near Sasuke's head, and Sakura started to panic until she recognized the green glow her hands were emanating as medical chakra. Naruto looked up as his teammate entered the room. Hey Sakura-chan. Guess what? Ba-chan here is going to heal Sasuke. She already woke Kakashi-sensei, so this shouldn't take too long. As Sasuke groggily woke up, Tsunade backed away and Sakura ran over and hugged the newly awakened boy. Ino stood by the door, somewhat disappointed. She just hoped that Sakura would remember her promise to be friendly rivals, now that Sasuke was awake. She'd missed her friend when they'd been fighting. Tsunade and Jiraiya both noticed Naruto seemed down after his teammate didn't bother to even say hello. Jiraiya used their old team hand signals to tell Tsunade about the boy's crush. What about the blonde at the door? She signed. Pinky's rival for duck butt, if I'd have to guess, was the quick response. Narrowing her eyes at Naruto, she considered his reaction to his pink-haired teammate. That's going to make telling him the news I have harder. In retrospect, however, I suppose it's a good thing that she doesn't return his interest. Would probably make it even more difficult, if that were the case. Looking between the two, she put a finger on her chin. Maybe I can get Jiraiya to tell him. He's always a sucker for. Glancing over, she noticed the toad sage had disappeared on her, leaving a note at the foot of Kakashi's bed. Walking over, she picked it up. Looking it over, she blinked as she read the note. Sorry, not a chance, Harem. Crushing the note in her hand, she cursed. Okay, Jiraiya, you've just lost your bathhouse peeping privileges. And this time, there's no monkey to say otherwise. Quote, all right, she said, addressing the young shinobi in the room. There is a meeting in my office tomorrow at 9. I've heard that your little group is known as the Konoha 12 inches. Well, all of you will be required to attend. Quote, that's fine. Was there anything else? Naruto asked, preparing to leave. When Tsunade shook her head, Naruto flashed her a foxy grin and mock saluted her. See ya tomorrow at 0900, Ba-chan. Quote, still grinning at her irritated look, he vanished from the room in a shunshin as the others in the room stared at him in shock. Sasuke, blinking in surprise, looked to the rest of them and voiced everyone's main question. Since when did the Dobi learn shunshin? Reappearing near his apartment, Naruto smirked to himself. Gonna have to thank Ero Sennin for the training tips and showing me the seals for shunshin. It was just so much fun to vanish and pop up somewhere else. The only way it could get better is if it were an actual teleportation jutsu rather than just chakra-enhanced movement. Heading inside, he wasted no time digging out his new outfit. After a few minutes, he finished changing and examined himself in the mirror. Damn, I look pretty good in orange and black. Should have thought of this sooner. Examining the pile of old clothes, Naruto grabbed a pair of scissors from his desk drawer and carefully cut the white Uzumaki swirls off all of the jackets. Gently running his thumb over the fabric, he felt a great deal of pride mixed with sadness. I swear to you, Ka-chan, I will make you and Dad proud of me. I won't let your sacrifices be in vain. That's the promise of a lifetime. Shaking off the melancholy thoughts, he gathered the clothes in his arms with a maniacal grin. Now that the hard part's out of the way, time for a little target practice. Using shunshin again, he still couldn't get over just how useful it was. Naruto popped up at Team 7's training grounds, fam. Ilyar logs in place as he separated his clothes into 3 separate piles. Getting a suitable distance from them, he turned around, carefully forming hand seals all the while. Okay, just like Ero Sennin taught me. Gotta inhale. Mold the chakra in my lungs, hold it, wait for the burning sensation, and exhale. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. He yelled, at the same time exhaling a moderately sized fireball at the first pile. Within seconds, the entire pile was a conflagration of blackened fabric, sizzling and popping as the flames licked and ate the material. Forming the same set of hand seals, Naruto ended on the tiger and fired another one, putting more chakra into this one and completely incinerating the second pile. Nothing but graying ash left where his former attire used to be. For a first attempt, the jutsu was fairly impressive. Naruto had managed to mold the chakra correctly with the proper hand seals. He'd gotten a hold of a Kaden scroll that Jiraiya had let him borrow, and had perused it like a beast. Not to mention the numerous times he'd closely watched Sasuke perform this jutsu. What he forgot on his third and final attempt was proper chakra measurement. This proved to be, well, bad for the landscape. Deciding to see just how big he could make it, Naruto once again formed the proper seals, leaned back, and practically shot a column of hellfire out of his gaping maw. A proper Kaden technique, when executed, allows the user to spew fire from their mouth as if they're a mythical dragon. They vary in size and shape, from the phoenix fireball that sprays small, but numerous, balls of fire in a rapid sequence, to the aforementioned grand fireball, which has the potential to burn an entire forest clearing straight to the freaking ground. The latter, in this case, was more accurate to what just happened to the remainder of Naruto's jumpsuits, and the grass, and the shrubs, and the ground, and the trees, hell, everything in the general direction of 20 feet in front of him was blackened bark and scorched earth. Staggering to his feet, he shook his head to clear the daze it was in, waving the air in front of him as he coughed a few times. He stared at the scorched spot that used to be his clothes, and pumped a fist in the air in triumph when he realized he had successfully used Sasuke's favorite fire jutsu. Not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. That last one, though, was a real scorcher. Okay, that was a horrible pun, and he was never using it again. Patting at his dust-covered and slightly singed clothes, he grimaced. Well, mostly successful. Still has a few kinks. Remembering something Jiraiya had let slip on their trip home about the uses of shadow clones, he nodded to himself. Note to self. Next time, I leave untested jutsu to the clones. Single quote. The next morning found the Hokage's office fairly full, as Naruto and company all crowded in. Tsunade sighed as she sat behind her desk, facing the assembled Konoha 12 and their respective sensei. Fiddling with the official marriage document, she stalled for time by examining those present. Naruto, she noticed, looked far more serious in his new attire, but he still seemed to radiate excitement. Sasuke, standing next to him, looked better than yesterday when she'd first seen him, but still seemed to be brooding. Sakura seemed torn between looking hopefully at the latter, and casting quizzical glances at the former, eyeing his new attire with curious eyes. Everyone else stood at relative attention, though the Nara boy looked as if he was going to fall asleep standing up, and the girl with buns in her hair seemed to be staring at her with stars in her eyes. Not even mentioning the dynamic duo of Guy and Lee, who were just starting their infamous sunset genjutsu. I definitely can't put this off any longer. Those 2 idiots will knock us all out with it unless I get started now, she thought to herself, a tick mark forming on her forehead. Clearing her throat loudly, she radiated killing intent at the 2, causing the genjutsu to implode, and the 2 spandex-wearing nin to pale before standing at NTION with the rest of the class. Tomorrow, when I officially become Hokage, I will be making an announcement to the entire village, but the news affects those here more than most. Seeing that she now had the rapt attention of everyone present, she continued. There will be a political marriage to solidify the new treaty brokered with Sunagakur. The respective councils agreed to this before I returned and the bride and groom have been decided upon. A young woman from Sunagakur will be coming here and will be marrying into one of Konohagakur's most respected clans. Tsunade stopped as most everyone turned their eyes to Sasuke, with occasional glances at Kiba, Shikamaru, Shino and Neji. I can see what you're thinking, but you'll be surprised to learn who the suitor is. She said. If it isn't anyone here, why are we here, Ba-chan? Naruto asked in confusion. Eye twitching in irritation, Tsunade frowned. That would be because the person in question is here, and you are it. That'll learn him. Silence permeated the room, as every eye in the room became laser-locked on Naruto, all wide and some boring holes into the unfortunate soul. One set in particular was apparently trying to burn a hole through his head and into Tsunade's, as both were feeling a bit hot under tea. He collar right now. Naruto chuckled, scratching the back of his head. Good one, Granny. You got us. Now seriously, who's the unlucky bastard? You are, Naruto. Stop with the jokes. You are joking, right? He paled when she shook her head. Seriously. I'm getting married. I'm only 13. This is bullshit. Sighing, Tsunade rubbed her temple as the room exploded with questions. A vein began throbbing on her forehead, and she slammed a fist onto the desk. Silence. Her roar silenced all present, and she pointed to Shikamaru, who had his hand raised like a good little genin. You. First question. Hokage-sama, you said that the Sunagakure woman would be marrying into a Konoha clan, but then said that Naruto would be the suitor. As far as we know, Naruto doesn't have a clan. He gave Naruto an apologetic look, letting the blonde know it wasn't a snub at his family situation. Naruto nodded, letting him continue. So, does this mean that Naruto actually does have a clan? Quote, as a matter of fact, Shikamaru, Naruto does. Or rather, I should say he has two clans. Eyes once more threatened to shoot clear of their sockets as she continued. Naruto's heritage has been a well-kept secret, the longest-kept secret in the history of this village, in fact. His mother was Uzumaki Kushina, last known member of the Uzumaki clan from the former village of Uzushiogakure. The former village, as you all know, was destroyed back during the Second Great Shinobi War, and as such, is honored here in Konoha by having their symbol emblazoned on our jackets and uniforms. This is a show of respect for the alliance formed when my grandmother Uzumaki Mito married the Shadaime Hokage. Ignoring Naruto's frantic hand gestures to stop, she continued, knowing that it was all coming out of the bag sooner or later. Might as well get this shit out now, while everyone's present. I'm not doing this a second time. In addition, as you may not know, when a person becomes Hokage, their family becomes clan automatically via Konoha law. Naruto is also the son of Namikaze Minato, better known as the Yondaime Hokage. Therefore, Naruto is the last heir of both the Namikaze and Uzumaki clans of Konoha. With a groan, Naruto slumped forward, palming his face as most everyone in the room was staring at him complete shock, none more so Han one particular Uchiha. The two noticeable exceptions were Asuma, who'd already been informed at the council meeting, and Kakashi who was giving him one of those creepy, eye smiles. Turning back to Tsunade, he huffed, arms folded. Ba-chan, you had better have a really good reason for this. Tsunade was surprised by the rage she saw in his usually cheerful eyes, until she took a moment and thought about it. Once this is announced, not only will he have his father's enemies after him, a lot of villagers will try and suck up to him. I knew this was going to make his life harder, but I honestly totally skipped that part. Meh, he'll work it out. He mastered the Rasengan in a week. An entire village full of shinobi should be something he'll have taken care of by the end of business today. Single quote. Referring to Naruto's question, she nodded. There are several, but let's start with the obvious. First, Sunagakure didn't just pick a random shinobi. They didn't play a game of darts with our shinobi roster, and just happened to pick you. No, they specifically asked for you. According to the council, and a little bit of common sense, that made it clear that they knew, at least in part, who you were, or rather, where you came from. Second, the woman they are sending is the daughter of a Kajin you, my little blonde miscreant, are related by blood or marriage to 4 of the 5 Hokage. Last, and certainly not least, Naruto, do you even know what the requirements to be a clan head here in Konoha are? Because even the council forgot this part. Quote, no, he grumbled. I haven't had the chance to. To be head of a clan, you must either be a jonin, or you must be married. Tsunade said, a grin on her face. The day you marry, you become head of the Namikaze clan and inherit all its assets, as well as its seat on the council. Quote, Bachan, what about the Uzumaki clan, Tte Boyo? His verbal tick resurfaced under the stress of the moment. Naruto, you are an Uzumaki as well as a Namikaze. Technically, your name is Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, so any children you have will be of both clans. As such, you will be restoring the Uzumaki clan as well as the Namikaze clan. If you're so bound and determined to restore the Uzumaki, this is a perfect chance. It's not like you'll have to worry about finding a wife, anyway. Quote, Naruto glared at her, the sort of glare he saved for dealing with Kyuubi, or the cupboard when he ran out of instant ramen. He did manage to grind out a question, though. Did they give us the name of the bride? Quote, glad for an excuse to escape his glare, the brat didn't glare often, so it was unnerving. Tsunade lifted the scroll. Quote, says here her name is Temari. Hand to chin, Naruto ran through his mind, trying to figure out what kind of girl she was. Could have sworn she was part of the Chunin exams. Wait, wasn't she the girl that? Glancing over at Tenten, he only confirmed his suspicions when he saw the girl wince in his direction, giving him a weak smile. Yep. Tsunade caught a glimmer of recognition in the blonde's eyes, followed by the sort of resignation reserved for those on death row. Inwardly groaning, she gave a gesture of dismissal to the rest of the group. All right, that's enough. I've said all I'm going to say until the official announcement tomorrow. All of you scat. I've got business with the soon-to-be married, here. Getting acknowledgement from most, the group filed out, the chatter exploding once they left the Hokage's office. She suspected that, by tomorrow, half of the village was going to know about it before she even made it official. Should have put a gag order on that lot, oh well. Turning to the man in question, she sighed. All right, what's up? Chuckling nervously, Naruto rubbed the back of his head, another nervous tick. Well, Temari-chan is a bit high maintenance. Plus, Gaara is his brother. You know, the Jinchuriki for the Aikibi. The one that tried to kill me, multiple times, I might add. Tsunade sighed as she pinched the bridge of her nose in exasperation. All right, ignoring the whole homicidal Jinchuriki problem for the moment, I have some things for you. Standing and crossing the room to the portrait of the fourth Hokage on the wall, Tsunade lifted it, revealing an elaborate seal on the wall. All right, Gaki, get over here. This is a blood seal, keyed to anyone from your father's line. I need you to open it for me. Pulling a kunai out of its holster, Naruto nicked his thumb and pressed the bloody digit against the seal. The seal seemed to rotate before it expanded and the safe unlocked with a quiet click. Reaching into the safe, Tsunade pulled out a scroll bearing the symbol of the Yondaime Hokage. All right, need you to bleed a bit more for me, she told Naruto in a teasing manner. Ignoring the obvious rolling of his eyes, she watched him undo the seal and then opened the scroll. She couldn't stop a snort of laughter as she read the short note. Hey old monkey, if you're reading this, then I didn't survive the Kyuubi's rampage. If so, this is literally my and Kushina's will. We leave everything to our newborn son, Naruto. In addition, no, I will not tell you how I finished my paperwork as fast as I did. Trade secret. Wait, you've been a Hokage. Screw it, I'm still not telling you. Hey Naruto, I think I have proof at least some of your sense of humor comes from your dad. Handing Naruto the scroll, she chuckled as he read it, grinning as he laughed near the end. Feeling better than he had since the meeting began, Naruto still had a few questions. Alright Bachan, what do we do now? Quote, well Gaki, since the scroll says you get everything, and you're going to be married, I say we go see your parents' house. While Naruto and Tsunade remained in her office, everyone else regrouped in a conference room down the hall. This is incredible, Ino shouted. This is the best scoop I've ever gotten. I never would have thought Naruto would be the first of us to get married, never mind become head of 2 clans. Well, you heard what the Hokage said, Suna demanded Naruto. Shikamaru said from his place against the wall, managing to sound coherent, even though he looked like he was going to slump to the ground any second. It doesn't make sense though, he said irritably. I get why his heritage was hidden, but I've seen the way the villagers look at him. Why would they despise Naruto? True to his nature, Shikamaru was more or less unable to let go of something so intriguing. I always thought he was just a loud mouth, Kiba piped up. Did you guys notice that he was acting strange in there? Naruto was really quiet. Yes, Shino said quietly. He seemed far more controlled than usual. In the past, he would react explosively to such news. This means one of two likely scenarios. 1. Naruto has matured greatly in a very short amount of time, possibly due to his recent contact with the Sannin, or 2. Naruto has always been that way and we have been dealing with a cleverly constructed facade. Given what we have learned, I believe that the latter is by far more plausible. Having said his piece, Shino exited the room, the door closing as everyone else tried to come to terms with his rather startling conclusions. In another conference room, Hinata was crying as Kurenai held her. When Tsunade informed them that Naruto was to be married, she felt as if her heart had been ripped out. For years, she had loved him from afar, but every time she tried to talk to him, she would stutter and completely embarrass herself, or even worse, faint outright. She'd never thought that she would run out of time to tell him so soon. Shish, it's okay Hinata, Kurenai told the girl softly. It's alright, let the tears out. Just because he is getting married doesn't mean you can't be his friend. Raising her head from her sensei's shoulder, Hinata looked tearfully at her. I didn't want to be his friend Kurenai-sensei. I love him. Quote. Gently stroking the girl's hair, Kurenai murmured, I'm sorry Hinata, but it's just not meant to be. You know how your clan works. Even if he wasn't getting married, in the end, you still wouldn't have had him. Quote. Sensei. The crying girl asked in shock. Shish. I know Hinata. I know it hurts, but time heals all wounds. For now, just let the tears out. Frowning at the wall as Hinata continued to sob, Kurenai cursed two things: clan laws, and the cruelty of fate. That afternoon, Naruto and Tsunade stood facing a gate in the far eastern section of Konoha. This, Naruto, is your parents' old house. Anything in there belongs to you, though I would recommend you do some cleaning. The seal on the gate here was made by your father and not even Jiraiya could bypass it, as it requires familial blood to open. With a slight smirk, she added, shouldn't be a problem for you, though. With a quick shunshin, Tsunade returned to her office, preferring to let the kid venture on his own. Unsealing the gate by reopening the cut on this thumb, Naruto entered his new property. The land was small for a clan compound, but he supposed the Namikaze clan had never been as large as the Uchiha or Hyuga. The gardens had long ago taken over and filled the stagnant lawn and koi ponds with green. Still, he could see the beauty, and a little work would restore it to its former glory. The main house stood in the center of the gardens, 3 stories of traditional stonework, and rice paper d'ors in need of some serious maintenance, with softly sloping red clay rooftops and opulent dragon guardians on the corners. He pushed open the main entrance, careful not to damage the aged wood. As expected, the paper gave way easily under his hands. He was planning on replacing it, anyway, so he wasn't concerned. No one had come into the house after his parents had died. All of the furniture remained where it was last, coated with a fine film of dust with a few cobwebs dotting the corners of the rooms. He passed through the entrance and into the sitting room, a television sitting at the far end of a kotatsu. Everything would have to be replaced, from the electronics to the fabrics, even the curtains, but it looked like most of the wood furniture, save all the chairs, he wasn't taking chances with. Them would be fine with a careful cleaning. He glanced around for another moment before making his way upstairs. It was dominated by bedrooms, 4 of them total. The master bed was the only one that looked like someone had used it before the house was abandoned. His parents' night clothes were still folded on the bed, waiting for them. With a melancholy sigh, he shut the door carefully and made his way to the 3rd floor. His parents, or perhaps his grandparents, had made the 3rd floor a training room. The practicality of it aside, it was huge, a large, open expanse with wood floors, threadbare training mats sitting in a pile in the corner, several training dummies lined up against the far wall, and various weapons along said walls. The training room wasn't the place for practicing jutsu, but it was more than appropriate for practicing taijutsu and weapon skills, as long as the person practicing wasn't Lee, or Guy. He returned to the ground floor, passing through the dining room and kitchen, noting with glee the amount of space he had for ramen, then noticing a tightly shut door just outside the kitchen. He pushed it open, revealing the cool, stone space of a basement, the jackpot, as far as the home of a ninja was concerned. He carefully took the stairs one at a time in case they were rotting through. Last thing he needed was to plunge a story or two to the ground below. Most of the room below was a library, cool but not damp, perfect for the delicate paper located here. The shelves were overflowing with scrolls and books. He could almost tell which belonged to his mother and which to his father just by the neatness some of the shelves seemed to have. A small corner of the room held a workbench, holding a strange, three-pointed kunai. The overflow of scrolls on the shelves above it seemed to indicate his father or mother was making weapons scrolls in their spare time. 1/3 of the basement was walled off to make a separate room that opened with another seal. It was obviously his father's private study, filled with fuinjutsu supplies. An open scroll lay on the large, but simple, desk at the opposite end of the room. He stepped inside to take a closer look. Picking up a scroll, he read the outer kanji. Hiroshin no Jutsu, huh. I wonder what it does. He almost sat down to read, but the overpowering smell of dust was beginning to bother him, and he needed to get some air before he went into a coughing fit. He decided it would be a good idea to get to bed in the next hour or so. He scouted out the cleanest room, a corner space on the second floor. He stopped in the doorway, producing 100 clones that looked rather unamused to be there. All right guys, I'm headed to bed, but I want you guys to start cleaning this place up. Start with the main rooms, and if you have time, start on the training fields. I want you 5 to head downstairs and start going through the library, and I want you to read that scroll I found earlier. Remember, this is our new home, so curb the enthusiasm, okay? That means no explosions. Watching the clones salute and run off, Naruto crawled into bed, at least somewhat satisfied with the day. Naruto wandered downstairs to discover a thoughtful clone had picked up some cereal for him. Grumbling a bit at himself for forgetting to transfer his stash of instant ramen, Naruto sorted through the memories of the clones dispelled during the night. A couple of things stuck in his head and he made mental note to explore them further, but what really had his attention was Harem no Jutsu. No way, this must be the jutsu that made Tusen a legend. Space-time ninjutsu. Oh, this is gonna take a lot of work. From what he could understand, the scroll was the rough outline of an incredibly complex teleportation ninjutsu. He thought he got the gist of what he needed to do, but more than half the notes were gibberish to him. Damn, I'm gonna have to learn fuinjutsu theory. Won't that be fun? Naruto headed outside intent on creating his clone army for the day. While he might get stuck learning protocol today, at least his clones could get something done. Before he could summon them, he noticed one of his clones from last night standing in the middle of a barren training field. Noting it had his attention, the clone started bouncing up and down excitedly. Boss, you're gonna love this. Bunshin Daibakua. As soon as the clone uttered those words, Naruto was rocked back as the training field became a small crater. Well, that certainly is interesting, but I'm pretty sure I said no explosions last night. Twitching in irritation, Naruto summoned 200 clones. Alright guys, form up in groups of 20. Once the clones formed rank, Naruto began handing them their assignments for the day. Alright, first group, we need to massively improve our chakra control if we want to use the stuff from the library. I want you to do the leaf balancing exercise while you water walk. With a quick salute, the first group headed down to the small pond near the back edge of the compound. Group 2, practice the henge and kawarimi. Tusen's notes said that when someone's mastered a jutsu, they can start to use it without hand signs. I want the ability to use a kawarimi without seals by the end of the day. Group 3, practice the C-rank jutsu we found yesterday. Group 4, calligraphy. Seals don't write themselves, ya know. Group 5, find every book on fuinjutsu theory in the library you can and start reading. Group 6, you get to work on the gardens. Try to keep most of it alive. Group 7, go move everything out of the old apartment, then I want an inventory of the house. Group 8, Kasen's Taijutsu scrolls, get practicing. Group 9, Kenjutsu training, use the Kodachi. Last but not least, Group 10. One at a time, practice that exploding clone thingy. In the already provided crater. Summoning one last clone, you. I want you to thoroughly reread the Hiraishin no Jutsu scroll. Every time one of theory clones dispels, I want you to read it. Quote. Damn it, I forgot. Creating a few more clones, you guys, Rasengan work. I want to be able to use it one-handed. Watching his clones get to work, Naruto vanished in a shunshin. Popping in with a quick, morning bachan. Naruto swiftly dodged the paperweight, the sword at his head. Sadly, he didn't see the empty sake bottle that followed it. Tsunade felt a strong easing of her spirit as she watched the jar smash her insane grandnephew back into the wall behind him. Ha! Doubt he'll stop calling me Granny, but man, that felt great. Trying to maintain a straight face as Naruto dragged himself back on his feet, Tsunade considered how to break the news. Deciding Naruto would probably just prefer it straight, she sighed. Alright Gaki, gonna cut straight to the chase. We don't have time for you to learn protocol, your fiancé is due today. Ignoring the sputtering and cursing her statement created, she tapped her chin in thought. There is a new problem too. Sunagakure promoted her to Chunin, and you remain a genin. I can't just promote you, much as I would like to, but I have an idea. Seeing Naruto take a keen interest, she smirked. I'll give you a week to get ready, then I want you to fight the students of Asuma, Kurenai. Guy, as well your own Team 7. Bachan, that's crazy, Naruto grinned. I love it. Good to hear Gaki, now let's get down to the West Gate. If we get there with time to spare, we can annoy Izumo and Katetsu. Quote. Temari was sick of riding in the carriage circumstances had forced upon her. She'd argued long and hard that she was still a Chunin and she could walk, but Baki had maintained that they had to follow tradition, and traditionally, brides rode in the carriage. In addition to being extremely uncomfortable, the journey was taking twice as long as the last time she had made the trip. Reaching over, she ran her hand along the smooth metal of her mother's war fan. At least I was allowed to keep this. Laying her head back against the seat, Temari focused on calming herself. Today, she would no longer be a Sunagakure shinobi, but one of the Leaf, and that hurt more than she would have believed. Despite how her little brother had been treated, she loved her village and has been proud to wear the symbol of the sand. She was jerked out of her thoughts as Kankuro stuck his head through the window. Hey, Nichan, how ya doing? I'm scared, little brother. I don't want to be married, especially not to a stranger from another village. I totally agree, Nichan, Kankuro said. Only thing I've heard is that you're marrying into a clan, but other than that, I've got nothing. Quote. Baki broke into the conversation. Looks like we're here. Seems the Hokage herself came to welcome you to Temari, which is either a very good or a very bad sign. Tsunade stood with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, wrinkling the red and white fabric of her formal robes of state. With her were Shizune, Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura. Gritting her teeth in irritation, Tsunade whispered to Naruto. If Kakashi doesn't show in the next 30 seconds, I want you to burn all his books. Hi, Bachan, Naruto whispered back. Your will shall be done. Torn between laughing and hitting him, Tsunade eyeballed Kakashi as he wandered up to the group just as the 4 Sunagakure shinobi approached. His timing meant she couldn't say anything, but the look in her eyes warned Kakashi that this conversation was not going away. Greetings and welcome to Konohagakure no Sato. I am Tsunade Senju, God I'm Hokage and I am most pleased to formally welcome you. Naruto faced Temari nervously, bowed and spoke the phrase Tsunade had hammered into his head while they were waiting. I welcome you Temari, my water is yours and I wish you shade and safety. Temari stared in complete shock. Not only had she not been expecting the traditional greeting of a Sunagaker groom to his bride, she couldn't believe this was who she was to marry. Snapping out of her reverie, Temari bowed in return. I greet you, Naruto. I am thankful for the honor. May you always find water and may our home be blessed with shade. She eyed him carefully. He seemed more serious than she remembered, more controlled. He had been a wild one during the exams, but now, he looked much more like the determined warrior she had seen defeat her brother. Naruto stiffened as Gaara shuffled near. His green eyes still bore the crazed look, but he seemed to have lost his murderous aura. Hey Gaara, how's it going? Naruto Uzumaki. Gaara spoke tonelessly. Will you protect my Nichan as one of those precious people you told me of? Naruto blinked, momentarily confused, then gave Gaara a small, warm smile. I swear I will, Gaara, and I always keep my promises. Gaara simply nodded. Thank you, for everything. I'm not sure I follow all of that, Naruto said quietly. I get thanking me for promising to take care of your Nichan, but what's everything else? Quote, you showed me true strength, Gaara replied just as softly. I have chosen to follow your path. I will protect those precious to me. I'm happy for you. Naruto smiled. Has it been hard? It is both harder and easier as time goes by. Ignoring the beast causes him to rage, but my mind is clearer. It's hard to describe. I understand, was all Naruto had to say. Most watching were confused. Naruto had already confided in Tsunade, so her grin was completely genuine, but Shizune was left wondering what the story behind this was. Temari and Kankuro knew what their brother meant, but he had not spoken to them in great detail about what had happened between him and the other Jinchuriki. Kakashi looked interested, but masked it behind his usual apathy quickly. Sasuke was glaring at Gaara, still angry that he had not been the one to defeat him. Sakura was nervous. She would never be able to forget the images of what he had done to Lee. Well, Tsunade said into the quiet that had settled over the group. I think Naruto should show Temari to their home, and I've made arrangements for the three of you in one of the hotels. Naruto interjected. Bachan, if it's alright, how about I take everyone with me? It's not like I don't have the room. Eyeing him, Tsunade shrugged. I suppose you can. Just remember I want you in my office tomorrow at 9. We need to swear Temari in and place her on Team 7. I don't have an opening on my team. Kakashi said hurriedly. There are no open slots, Tsunade growled back, eye twitching in rage. If you weren't always late, you would have heard me explain that an hour ago. Secretly Tsunade had hopes that the time spent together on a team would cause the two to bond. She didn't want the little Gaki stuck in a cold, loveless marriage. It was perhaps one of the few things he would not survive. She believed Temari and Naruto could make it work, but without an extra push, might not make the effort to try on an emotional level. Kakashi gave Tsunade one of his eye smiles. Well, that works, but I'll need some time to evaluate her and get their teamwork up to par. Should be a busy week for us. Naruto drooped. Bachan, I'm kinda occupied this week. Didn't Kakashi-sensei get the message? Tsunade glared at the masked Jonin. No, because he was late. Kakashi, Naruto is training for an impromptu Chunin exam Monday. He will be fighting all the members of the Konoha 12 feet with the exception of Lee. Quote. Kakashi stared, eye wide in shock. Hokage-sama, that is simply insane. Tsunade shrugged. It's what the Gaki chose. Naruto lead his fiancée and guests into the compound right as the last of the exploding cones decided to blow himself up. As much as he wanted to laugh, he found he had his hands full getting everyone to put their weapons away. Guys, it was just a stupid clone blowing himself up. Nothing to worry about, I swear. Once everyone settled, Naruto began a small tour. Alright, welcome to the Namikaze Uzumaki estate. As you can see, we've got trees, some training grounds, a giant hole in the ground, stupid freaking clones, and gardens. Eyeing the general destruction, Naruto felt he had to add. Nay, Temari, I sure hope you garden better than I do, 'Cause I think my clones really screwed that up. To her own surprise, Temari found herself agreeing. The clones had really messed things up. Looking around a bit more, Temari felt that so far, her new home wasn't too bad. She would have some privacy even if everything struck her as being a bit green. Sunagakure didn't have much opportunity for gardening, but she had maintained a flower box of herbs in her room for several years. I know a little gardening, Naruto, she said. You have to remember, though, I come from a desert. All this green seems really odd to me. Naruto looked a little crestfallen, so she spoke quickly. Not that it's bad. I've always wanted a big herb garden. Alright guys, Naruto almost yelled in excitement, I wanna show you where you're staying tonight. Leading everyone inside, he began to point out features of the house. Make yourselves comfortable in the sitting room. I'm not sure if everything works, but you're welcome to try out the television and kotatsu. The kitchen is through there, but it's not exactly stocked yet. There are plenty of rooms on the second floor, so take your pick, and if you want to train, the third floor is a practice room. He grabbed Temari gently by the wrist. Come on, I'll show you. As she was dragged up the stair, Temari had to admit that so far things weren't as bad as she had feared. The house really needed a woman's touch, but it was quite nice. She wasn't really sure what to make of her fiancé though. One moment he was hyper as hell, the next he was completely calm, dealing with 4 spooked Sunagakure shinobi, one of whom was Gaara for Kami's sake. Honestly, he was a puzzle. Leading her to the bedrooms, Naruto pointed one out. This is yours, mine is the one right next to it. Temari was a tad confused. I get my own room. She was less confused and more concerned when he turned to her with a completely blank face. Temari, I'm sure you're even less thrilled about this than I am. I want to get to know you better and I hope that one day we'll be happy, but now, we're practically strangers. I thought it'd be best if we learned to trust each other naturally. Quote. Temari admitted to herself that she was impressed with his analysis of the situation. He had even brought up some points she hadn't thought of. In Sunagakure, it wasn't uncommon for a husband to demand his arranged wife be in his bed the evening of their marriage, and she had expected that behavior. Simply because she knew arranged marriages had nothing to do with whether or not two people loved or trusted one another. Thank you, Naruto, was her heartfelt response. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. Wanting to impress his guests, Naruto created a handful of clones and sent most off to read cookbooks and the rest to go grocery shopping. With time to kill, Naruto headed to one of the restored training fields to test what his clones had learned. Raising his hand, he was pleased to see a half-formed Rasengan. Definitely done by the end of the week, he thought with a smirk. Swapping places with a training dummy, he grinned. Silas Kawarimi, check. He still had to use the ram sign for henge, but that was at least a major improvement. Wanting to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, Naruto created clones to test both his new kenjutsu and taijutsu skills. Both appeared to be his mother's, and even with just the day's training with them, the styles felt natural. Finishing the last clone off with a particularly vicious cut that bisected the clone from groin to shoulder, he cringed. Wow, men must have dreaded fighting Kasen. The first elemental jutsu his clones picked made him snort in exasperation. Apparently, he really loved irony. Suoro no Jutsu, the same jutsu he had to save Kakashi-sensei from when they fought Zabuza. Trapping a clone in it, Naruto had to admit, the jutsu had its uses, but he would have to see about having enough water to use it. Moving on, he tried Daidappa. This one has potential. Watching the jutsu shred the trees he tested it on, he wondered if he had overloaded the jutsu. Rather than just blow things away, certain trees in the target area looked like they had been attacked with razors. Shrugging and filing that away for a different day, Naruto decided to test his last elemental jutsu. Remembering his internal promise after the last time he had barbecued himself, Naruto created some clones and backed off. Gukaku no Jutsu. And won't the Tem be ecstatic that I can use on of his jutsu? This time, The additional practice of the clones paid off, and rather than create giant explosions, Naruto only created the smaller explosions he wanted. Satisfied with his day, Naruto barely had the energy to flop face first on his bed before he fell asleep. The next morning found Temari waking up to the smell of something delicious. Rubbing the sleep out of her eyes, she wandered down to the kitchen in her panties and a large t-shirt, forgetting that she was not back in Sunagaku. Yawning and stretching, she grunted a morning to the shape at the stove. When she didn't get a response, she looked more fully at the figure making breakfast and felt herself freeze. It was Naruto, staring back with wide eyes, in just a pair of shorts. She thought the age difference would bother her, but he looked a bit older. Between that and his new behavior, she could easily forget she had several years on him. He's actually pretty cute. Naruto, for his part, had totally forgotten the omelet he was making as he stared at Temari. He might even owe Ero-Sennin a small apology, certainly this was worth seeing. With her hair down, sleep tousled and framing her face, Naruto came to the sudden realization that he might just have gotten a really good deal with this marriage after all. They might have continued staring at each other for a while, except Kankuro had walked in and immediately burst into loud guffaws. Yo, Naruto, the omelet seems kinda black and smoky. Nichan, you might wanna go put on some pants before he burns down the house. Quote. Temari glanced down and let out a girlish shriek as she ran back to her room, mercifully unaware that Naruto's gaze followed her retreat closely. Kankuro, watching him, and seeing the blush on his face, began to laugh until Naruto flung a kitchen knife into the wall next to his head. Raising his hands in wordless apology, he decided to help out and set the table while Naruto disposed of the charred omelet. Kid, she is your fiancé, you're allowed to look, ya know, he said, trying hard not to laugh. He was getting a stitch beneath his ribs. Rolling his eyes in irritation, Naruto shot back, gee, I'm gonna take relationship advice from the guy that wears makeup. It's war paint. It intimidates enemies, runt. An infuriated Kankuro responded. What kinda shinobi is intimidated by makeup, gaite? Naruto mocked back. With a completely nonplussed expression, Kankuro calmly stated, I don't think you can actually call me that, since I'm older. Quote. With a foxy grin, Naruto was prepared to return fire before he was interrupted. Would you assholes just shut up? Temari snapped as she reappeared, pulling her hair into her usual pigtails. Kankuro, knowing his sister's usual reaction to being embarrassed, was able to dodge when she swung her FA N at him. Naruto, however, was unaware of his danger until the large iron fan connected with his head. Slamming into the wall, a scene very reminiscent of Jiraiya and Tsunade, Kankuro began to laugh when he heard the dazed boy murmur, wow, I think I'm in love. Quote. After some brief first aid, where Temari wrapped his injury while Kankuro laughed and even Gaara appeared to smile, Naruto and his guest stood in front of Tsunade in her office. Deciding it would be in everyone's best interest to gloss over the partial mummification of the groom-to-be, she ached Temari. Nervously maintaining eye contact with the elder Kunoichi, Temari barely heard what was said to her until the end. Do you swear on the will of fire and your own honor allegiance to Konohagakure? Quote. Reaching back and undoing her Sunagaku Hitai, Temari calmed herself as she swore herself to her new village. My honor, my life, I do so pledge. With a nod, Tsunade turned and stamped the registration sitting behind her on the desk. Pulling out a leaf Hitai, she passed both items to the younger blonde. With that done, you should know that the wedding ceremony will be in 2 months. Baki, you and Temari's brothers are welcome to visit at any time. I'll be granting you travel passes when we finish here. Are there any questions? Hokage-sama, what are my expected duties? Temari asked hesitantly. Tsunade was impressed the girl was thinking that far ahead, but was surprised that Naruto's body language had suddenly switched from passive to pro-tective. Well, this is a surprise, I didn't think he would understand that, but apparently he does, and he wants to protect the girl. Seems the little Gaki will be just fine. Neither council has pressed the issue yet, but I expect there will be pressure in the future. Tsunade replied, hedging her answer somewhat. Until the Gaki there matures, you'll probably be fine. You're both young, it'll be a while before the council is concerned. Temari nodded in understanding. At least she wasn't going to be forced to produce any children she didn't want.